My name is Rosalie Green. I'm 45 years old and studying to get my master's degree in secondary education with a credential to teach communication arts and lit. I hope to teach in the Catholic schools after graduation. For the past 20 years after graduating from St. Martin's University with a BA in Religious Studies, I've been a homemaker and a mother to 8 children. Now that my youngest children have been in school for a few years, I'm bored at home and want to finally pursue my lifelong dream of teaching. Currently, during the day, I'm either studying for my classes, doing chores, or working as an on-call substitute para in my local public schools. I assigned myself Chapter 3 to read and present. This chapter delved into topics of race, racial biases, gender, sexuality, and overcoming biases, and creating a safe space in our classrooms. It also spoke about English language learners and the different methods of integrating them within the class. There is a growing trend within this country of students who identify as 2 or more races or ethnicities. Since the 1960s, there has been a large influx of immigrants of different race nationalities into this country, larger than any time period prior. Race refers to a group of individuals sharing a common socially determined category, often related to genetic attributes, physical appearance, and ancestry. Racial categories can vary by society. For example, in the US, an individual with any known African ancestry is considered Black, but in Caribbean and Latin American nations, race is influenced by financial prosperity and social class. Upward social mobility increases the likelihood of being classified as white. Ethnicity refers to shared common cultural traits such as language, religion, and dress. Culture is set as a learned Culture is a set of learned beliefs, values, symbols, and behaviors. A way of life shared by members of society. There is not only a national culture, but also microcultures or subcultures. Different classes, religions, sexual orientations, etc. have their own subculture. Even while the racial gap between whites and other races has decreased, the number of teachers of color has still remained low. About 80% of teachers are white, which is disproportionate to the number of students who identify as people of color. We need to make a greater effort to attract more people of color into the teaching industry, notably. Even though schools were desegregated in the 1950s, there's been a trend towards resegregation in neighborhoods and schools since the 1980s. Paradoxically, we are a lot less culturally and racially diverse as a nation than we were after the civil rights movement, even though we have many immigrants of color. immigrating into this country. The tendency these days, since city planning and other agencies refuse to address this issue, is to turn a blind eye toward the resegregation trend. What biases do you have when thinking about people who are a different race from you? Stereotypes of different races and genders tend to persist. For example, Asians are intelligent and good at maths and science. Black people are more likely to get into trouble. Girls are better at reading and the arts. Just to name a few. We need to name our biases and try to overcome them. Personally, I don't like any of the stereotypes because it sets people up to fail. An Asian student who is better at languages and the arts would find a difficult time with a maths or science teacher who expected them to be brilliant at it. Black students are frequently passed over academically and find themselves shunted into a school-to-prison pipeline. Thus, it becomes a self-fulfilling stereotype. Girls can be good at maths and science. In fact, I know two personally who are working in or going to work in science-related fields. We also need to include more viewpoints from the diverse cultures we serve, such as using more examples of Latin American and other literature and history, instead of focusing on Eurocentric literature and history in our curriculums. As the US becomes more racially diverse, we need to respond by changing the way we teach to meet those needs. Gender and sexuality are hot-button topics in our schools these days. There have been debates on the value of single-sex education, the role of gender in the classroom, and how to make schools respond to the diverse and sexual and gender identities represented in the public schools. As teachers, we need to move away from gendered language, such as using boys and girls, and use a more unifying, gender-neutral term such as students. Depending on location, gender expression and/or sexuality may or may not be discussed within school. This chapter suggests that having students make a safe space poster with the colors of the pride flag and a sign that says, "All are welcome here," as well as using students' preferred pronouns and preferred names. It's important to note that whilst we may not agree that it's okay to be gay, we must not believe that it's okay to discriminate against people because they are gay. There are two types of English acquisition programs: the transitional approach and the immersion approach. The transitional approach uses the native language as a bridge to English language instruction. Academics or subjects are first taught using the native language. But progressively, students will transition to using English. Cultural assimilation is also often stressed with the goal of integrating into English-only classrooms, typically within 2 to 3 years. The immersion approach introduces English at once. Instruction is often only in English. Language submersion is an extreme example of immersion, which places students in classes where only English is spoken in a failure or succeed entirely approach. English as a second language, or ESL, provides pull-out classes for additional instruction in English reading and writing to supplement the English immersion program. Dual language programs are designed to help students learn English while maintaining their native language. Instruction occurs in 2 languages, usually starting in kindergarten or first grade and continuing for 5 years or longer. These programs prepare students to speak, read, and write fluently in 2 languages, as well as successfully completing their other academic courses. Two-way immersion programs enroll a balance of native English speakers and native speakers of the partner language. English-speaking students are enrolled to learn a second language. Classes are taught to all students in both languages. In the founding years of this country until World War I, many schools taught bilingual education. When we entered the First World War, languages other than English came to be seen as unpatriotic. Public pressure routed out German from the curriculum, even though at the start of the First World War, 1 in 4 secondary students were studying both English and German at the same time. Suspicious of any foreign languages and cultures, and the desire to force immigrants into immediate enculturation into the wider American culture caused many individual states to ban foreign language instruction for the first 8 years of school. This was declared unconstitutional in Meyer versus the state of Nebraska case in 1923. In the time before World War II, there was a large community of German-speaking settlers in Texas. They were well accepted by their peers as they spoke their native language on the playgrounds at school and at home. Unfortunately, World War II forced these German immigrants to abandon the language or face fierce discrimination. They were forbidden to use their native language at all in school and in public places. Instruction was in English only, and within 1 generation, the German immigrants forgot their native language, and the children grew up speaking only English. Even though the previous example was not in the textbook. I learnt it from a YouTube documentary given by a member of that community as she lamented the loss of her German community because they had forgotten both their native language and culture. Forcing enculturation and English only has had the deleterious effect of making people forget their heritage and their language. We can enrich one another by listening and learning from other cultures and microcultures within our society rather than forcing our own on everyone. Today, there are more than 5 million English language learners enrolled in the schools in the US. In summary, we need to remember our racial biases in our teaching and to work towards changing them. Listening to others and being sensitive to their needs, including using less gendered language in the classroom and using preferred names and pronouns, will help to create a more positive learning environment. Additionally, as a country, we need to shift our emphasis in English language learning programs, not only on the acquisition of English, but also on maintaining the English learner's original language as well. To be successful in this, we will need to move towards a more bilingual form of education in the future, but that will require training professional teachers to be multilingual. The goal of education is to become increasingly sensitive to race, culture, gender, and sexuality, as well as responsive to English learners' needs for both English mastery and maintaining their original language.